If you're not tired of me, I am. Thank you for coming. I'm sure you're also interested in the budgetary issues in Singapore. This is the first time that we've actually gotten a number of organizations, civil society organizations, together to discuss the budget issue. I think without further ado, we can invite Brema from Marua. She's helping to moderate and facilitate the forum today.
Thank you very much, Roy. And on behalf of Empowering Singaporeans, which comprises Roy, Hui Hui, and I forget this guy's name, I'm joking, Zuhian. Yes, who doesn't know Zuhian? Yeah. That they have put this together, and it came about from discussions that was going on in Marua's side, because they had written very interesting documents on TOC, part 1 to part 10 of the discussions on the economy. And I am personally interested in budget, so I was pestering Zihian, and then Zihian said, okay, let's meet and talk about a submission by Marua to the government on what we think the budget, what we wish to say about the budget. I think that's a good first step for all of us. The second good step that has happened is that then they decided we need a budget forum, which I think is very, very good. Prior to this, AWARE has started the first budget in the year 2011, right? And then two of us who were in AWARE at that time, Suyong, who's not here, and myself, we attended some training on budget analysis. We did a capacity building. We did it, and then the second round, I think AWARE has taken it up, and they are continuing with the process. So I think these are very good signs that are happening in Singapore. The other good thing that is happening in Singapore is that I was told by Roy that we are having about 130 people who have registered to come here. So I think we first have to give them a big round of applause for all this work. The most challenging of all that work is to find a room. Many of you all may not fully understand the difficulties in finding a room. And we share among ourselves the information. Then as more and more groups go to this particular owner of the room, then he will start looking at all the people who are coming. Then he might either go into a panic, or the prices go up, and then we can't afford the room, right? And NGOs support those who have rooms or space. For fellow NGOs is also very weak. When I say NGO support for NGO, many NGOs have space, but their space is small. Some have bigger space, some are centrally located, and yet it doesn't come. So please appreciate the hassles, please appreciate their call, asking, because I've been told this is a very expensive room. So, and it has come out right now from private pockets. So any offsetting will be very much appreciated. This forum has taken place with the support of Workfare Singapore, of which Vincent is here. And then it is also supported by Function 8, a whole group is here. And then, of course, by Marua, where we have a few characters around. I see a few. So, for all of us, I think this is very important. And we hope that from here, there will be better outcomes for the next, for 2015. And 2015 is going to be even more important. Because when I did the analysis for 2012, it was on the after the 2011 elections. So we are looking at 2011 budget to make some comments on the 2012. It was very interesting how budgets are adjusted in an election to be here or in a, I think that is very important. So we have to become smarter, more knowledgeable, more alert, and the most important thing that you hear from civil society today is claiming your own citizenry. because they will go straight into content, so I'm setting the stage. Budget awareness. To understand what do we mean really by budget, it's a very big name, and then we have this vision of our Minister of Finance, Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam, walking into Parliament with that briefcase, right? And okay, it's budget. But is that what is budget? Have we even examined any of the documents properly, right? That is a budget awareness. 1975, he joined NTUC Income in 1977, became its CEO, and during the 30 years, he built up the business and grew the assets. He has written several books, is now the president of the Financial Services Consumer Association. He was also the candidate, one of the four, for the 2011 presidential election. Roy Ng, who is part of the Empowering Singapore group as well as part of Marua, is a socio-political blogger of the Heart Truths, which is the second most read political individual blog in Singapore. He has analyzed issues on income inequality and minimum wage in Singapore, and has also written about the healthcare, retirement, education and transport systems in Singapore. The third speaker is Mr. Leong Zi Hian, the past president of the Society of Financial Services Professionals, an alumnus of Harvard University, Wharton Fellow, CCAM, I will find out what that stands for, I'm not sure, fellow and an author of 4 books. He is frequently quoted in the media and also previously hosted a radio show and wrote a daily newspaper column on financial issues. He has been invited to speak. This one, for all of us who knows him, I think we can almost recollect by heart. He has been invited to speak in more than 100 countries, 100 times in 25 countries on 5 continents. He loves to say it like he has served as Honorary Counsel of Jamaica, Chairman of the Institute of Administrative Management, and Founding Advisor to the Financial Planning Associations of Brunei and Indonesia. He has 3 masters, 2 bachelors, and 15 professional. I'm reading a bio that has been given. Recently, he was involved in the award-winning Ilo Ilo as the executive producer, and he blogs at leongzihian.com. Dr. Vivian Wee is the second Research and Advocacy Director. Oh, this is also very long. She is concurrently Project Director of AWARE's program Gender Equality is Our Culture, funded by UN and implemented jointly with a group in Indonesia called Solidaritas Perempuan of Indonesia. She's a founding member of AWARE. Vivian previously served on at least 5 executive committees and several subcommittees. She formerly chaired the National Task Force Stop Violence Against Women, led by SCW, the National Women's Body. She's an anthropologist and has worked extensively on gender and development, especially in relation to culture. She taught at NUS, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, the City University of Hong Kong. She played a key role in initiating the Master's Program in Development Studies at City University of Hong Kong. She is currently Associate Faculty at SIM, teaching in the Master's Program in Community Leadership and Social Development, which she helped to design. She has been involved in several multi-country networks and programs spanning Indonesia, Pakistan, Middle East, and Africa. Dr. Vincent Vijay Singh trained in social work and did his doctorate in social policy at Sheffield University. He practiced as a family social worker and set up a consultancy in London in 2006. He returned to Singapore in 2009, and after some consultancy work with a school in Burma, Myanmar, and the then Ministry of Community Development, Youth and Sports, was appointed inaugural Executive Director of Migrant Workers Group Transient Workers Hour 2 in 2010. He is currently a social work lecturer at a local university. Dr. Vijay Singh joined the Singapore Democratic Party in July 2010. He was the party's treasurer and head of communications and was a candidate in the 2011 general elections. He drafted the party's 3 annual shadow budgets. That's interesting. He resigned from SDP in 2013 to work more specifically on civil liberties issues. He's a founding member of Workfare Singapore. Then it is all about myself. And Oh, good. It's not so long. And I think many of you all know that I'm the president of Marwa, a human rights group. I founded and led the migrant group, Transient Workers Council. Started a very extensive and intensive CEDAW project in Aware and led it for 8 years. And now the UPR, Universal Periodic Review, which is a human rights report card to Geneva. This is in a nutshell what I do. And I try to survive by doing consultancies. So without, I think it's good.
First, let me thank all of you for turning up. I was once speaking in the hall like this, and there was only one person in the hall. I delivered my speech, and I said, after that, he nodded his support. And I said, thank you for coming. He says, I got no choice, I'm the next speaker. Now, when I was invited to give a presentation, I asked the question, what would I do if I were the finance minister? And we know our finance minister, Taman, has been in his office for more than 5 years. So I'm going to give my views, and at the end I'm going to ask you whether we got a good finance minister. Familiar with them, cost of living, jobs, transport, health care, cost of doing business, population, national service. So let's look at each of these items, what the issues are. Now, Singapore has a high per capita income, one of the highest in the world. And why are our people still so happy? Because the high income is just one part of the equation. Equally important is the cost of living. Now, I traveled to Indonesia. They have income maybe about 1/5 of Singapore, or even less in Jakarta. But the cost of living there is also big. And the people there are relatively happy they can get by. So therefore, we don't look at the level of income, but we also see, compare with the cost of living. And the most important factor is to look at the country's spread between the high and the low income earners. This is what is called the Gini coefficient. Among the developed countries, it's a country we are familiar with. It's all in this red line, it's called Singapore. We are worse than America. America is very bad and very worse. Then next is the UK. The countries with the best happiness index are the countries of Scandinavia, and they are all on this side. Denmark, Norway, England, Sweden. So therefore, if you want to understand why Singaporeans are so unhappy with the cost of living, the answer is here. Now, there is a website which I saw recently, where they invite people from around the world to submit data. How much does it cost to rent a house or to have a house? How much does it cost to have transport? How much does food cost, and so on? And these are contributed by individuals around the world. They say, where are you from? I'm from Sydney. How much does it cost? They submit. And then these are data collected from many people. And I says, how does Singapore stand? The answer is, the cost of living in Tokyo is 14% cheaper than Singapore. We all know Tokyo is expensive, but that's not true. Some things are expensive, but after you take car and houses into account, it could be quite different. Next is New York is about the same as Singapore in cost of living, but in terms of wages, New York are much higher. And then Kuala Lumpur is half of Singapore. And then London is more expensive than Singapore, but Hong Kong and Sydney are cheaper than Singapore. So this is an indication of the cost of living. Next item is jobs. What's wrong with jobs in Singapore? our biggest problem is competing with foreigners. And the foreigners, those on employment pass, these are the people from other countries. They come here and they get jobs at managerial, professional level. They pay no levy. The employer pay no levy. The number of people when Lee Hsien Loong become Prime Minister was 99,000. 5 years later, double. Next category is the category below that. The number was 44,000. It went up 4 times. The total number here, 300,000. These are the people who are competing with our white-collar people, workers. I go to the airport every month to do some consulting in Indonesia. I asked the taxi driver, what were you doing before? They were not bankers, but they were in trading, manufacturing, construction, and now they are taxi drivers. All these thanks to these people who compete with them for jobs. We are not talking about work permit holders, domestic maids, or construction workers. We are talking about categories that compete with our own people. Then you have this word which I will say is the dirty word. It's called outsourcing. And the government outsource cleaning jobs, guards, and other jobs. They outsource. What's the outcome of outsourcing? The contractor bid for the job, employ the workers that were retrenched at 30% lower. And the contractor gives the margin. The cost of the country is still the same. The workers get 30% less. Outsourcing is a dirty word. It's a way of depressing wages. Okay, and of course it is okay in countries where there's a minimum wage, but not in Singapore. Okay, so you continue to have this pressure. The outsourcing is, and of course what's very bad is the biggest, okay, not biggest, the government is active in doing outsourcing. When they should be setting the alternative, employ people and say this is the benchmark for salaries in different jobs. They do outsourcing and allow salaries to be depressed. Well, public transport, this is quite common. When you take a train, and it's peak hours, it's like that. Alright? And then, after 2 years of no fare increase, the government now has the courage to approve through the PETC, which we all think is not that independent, a fare increase of 3-4%, and the amount of increase is $53 million a year. Of course, the ordinary people were very angry with this kind of train breakdowns and congestion. You still want to increase, okay? Then I take a look, and what I saw, very few people think at research. I'm like young CGN. I also look at the internet for research, and the figure shocked me. How much does the government collect in COE? It's called Vehicle Quota Premium. In the year 2011, they collect $2 billion. 2,000 million. In the year 2012, they collect 2.5 billion. 2,500 million. Even if they say we need 2 million to survive, the increase is 500 million. That's 2012. You guess what's the amount in 2013? 3 billion, that's my guess. Just by looking at the COE price increase, it's 3 billion. So that's the amount. You mean after you collect 3 billion, you cannot take 2% and say we will fund the increase. So the citizens don't even have to pay until public transport become more comfortable. You need to cut. Okay, so this is, you think you got a good finance minister? Is he using the money appropriately? Alright, so healthcare, of course, citizens are worried, will MediShield Life be more costly? The answer is yes. Okay, so our Prime Minister says, we are going to give to the pioneer generation. And the pioneer generation is people who are 65 this year. I belong to the pioneer generation. But most of you, then maybe, are you? Most of you are not. Now, when the government says pioneer generation, this is what the government does. They do cut off. You are okay to get it. The rest don't get it. You may live until 90 years old. According to the current one, you're not pioneer generation. I don't know whether you're okay. But I don't like this kind of cutting according to when you were born. At least you can say, okay, we will give to people when they reach 65. Doesn't matter when you reach 65. You don't implement this thing for you cut one generation, and then after that, other people. Of course, they practice this earlier on with the baby boomers. If your baby was born last year, you get nothing, and this year you get 20,000 tax. I don't like this kind of policy. It's most unfair. Just because you're on the wrong side, you get nothing. And then the other side, they get a lot. But of course, Singaporeans are also not very appropriate. You get, you are happy. And you don't get, you complain. You don't know what is fair. If you get, other people in similar circumstances should also get. You only take care of yourself. So I think Singaporeans, we ourselves are because we think if we can get a happy to tell the government, we forget that other people don't get. So I don't like this concept of pioneer generation. I say everybody, once they hit 65, give it. Alright? Now, when you are going to give $300, for example, if I'm a finance minister, everyone above 65 gets $300 to pay for the higher healthcare cost. The cost is $100 billion per year. We are spending 12.3 billion on defense. And if we take 100 million from here to pay for this, we still got 12.2. 12.3, 12.2. We also spend 11.6 billion education. If we move from education to healthcare, 11.6 to 11.5 also. Okay, so our finance minister is the one who is supposed to do all these sums, and I want to tell him, I want to tell you, get a new finance minister. Okay, I'm not going to talk about education to 11.3, 11.6, but I feel strongly a large part of it is wasted. We send people 4 years university to be an engineer, they come out to sell. It's like that. So many people are going to university at the state's money or using their parents' money, and they come out and do something else. And this is all part of the 11.6 billion. Okay, but that's a separate issue for 2015 budget. Okay? Alright, my numbers are all taken from last year's budget. This is how the money was spent. Cost of doing business. Small companies in Singapore say very hard to survive. I run a small company. I know how hard to earn money and all the costs, wages, rentals, and other costs very high. And therefore I asked, how many companies are profitable in Singapore. I was shocked. And the figures are here, and there are a lot of figures. I want to use the key figures. Now, if the economy is moving properly, you expect 85% of companies to be profitable, 15% to be not profitable. That would be what my common sense says should be a proper economy. In Singapore, not profitable companies 106,000, profitable 57. 65% of companies are not profitable. 35% are profitable. You look at the numbers over the years, has been like that. For 10 years has been like that. Later on, you're going to ask me, if these companies are not profitable, how are they still surviving? We can discuss that. The next item is, maybe the company is not profitable, small. Sure, they are small. The total profit of profitable companies is 90 billion. The total losses of loss-making companies is 63 billion. The net profit is 26 billion. This is how lopsided our economy is. I call the IRAS. May I speak to an officer who can tell me how to interpret these figures? The answer I get is no. If you want our website, you can read the explanation there. Now, the average loss per loss-making company was 210,000. 8 years ago, the loss is now 600,000. Now, if our businesses are not profitable, of course, when the government says pay higher CPF, sure they complain. Already they can't survive. Something is wrong in our economy. The way cost and other things are happening. I asked Mr. Leong, can you take a look at my figures and help me see whether I make any mistake? And he says, he replied to me, I'm also shocked to see the figures. National service. For 25 years, even when I was in NTUC income, I write to the newspaper. National service has to be changed. It is very costly. And of course, let me tell you what is the impact of national service. First, we all know that national defense is important for Singapore. But like moderator, chairman, chairwoman say, appropriate. Are we doing things appropriately? Are we overdoing things? Alright? Now, Singapore has 71,000 active soldiers. Half are regulars, the other half are NSmen. This one, I got no complaint. If you look at the numbers in neighboring countries, we do need 70,000. But I think the reservists, 950,000, is too high. Appropriate number for reservists is 400,000. Now, I carry out a petition, 4,000 people signed, and I ask you all to get more people to sign. The biggest complaint of the people who provide the feedback is not the full-time. They say full-time 2 years is okay. But it says the reservists. For 13 years, I have to call up for reservists, and I have to keep fit. If I don't keep fit, I will call up for remedial training. And this is disrupting my work. My employers don't like it. Okay? And I also have children to look after. My wife don't like it also. because the children are sick, and then she can't cope. So therefore, reservist training is excessive. We don't need 13 years, we only need 5 years. When you finish your ROD, 5 years you hit peak, and after that, you should you don't need to come back unless there's the war. When there's the war, you are called back. But other than that, you shouldn't be called back. So reservists, I think we should cut to 5 years. And then when you are ROD at 22, by 27 it's okay. For 5 years, you're not married yet. And when you are married at 30, you shouldn't be called up for reservists. So my petition says reduce full-time national service to 1 year. And the reason is, most of the NS men say the first year they spend time on military training. The second year, they spend time waiting to be ROD. Or cleaning the place. Cleaning the place, waiting to be ROD, or preparing for National Day parade. We cannot waste our manpower like that. Our males come to work 3 years after the females. 2 years of the waiting time to call it to come out. 3 years behind. And then they have to compete with foreigners. At one time they compete with girls, now they compete with foreigners. 3 years is very harmful. So I would say let's cut short. I was in KL, my friend told me something I know all along. He says, Kim Lian, the 2 countries with the lowest birth rate in the world are Singapore and Taiwan. And the reason is emissions. I know that all along, but because of the emissions can see. Alright, so Taiwan, in spite of threat from China, decided it will scrap national service. When was Singapore reduced to 1 year? I'm not asking to scrap. Overcrowding. So the 4 countries in the world with the highest rate of overcrowding, 2 of them are not countries. They are territories in China. The worst is Macau, followed by Monaco, followed by Singapore, followed by Hong Kong. We all know China and India are very big population, but they are not so overcrowded. Right? In terms of population per square kilometer. My wish is, if I were the finance minister, I will take 53 million from COE, give to the public transport company, so that citizens don't have to pay higher fares. I will take $100 million from the defense budget, so that everybody above 65 can get $300 a year to pay for the increase in medicine life. I will stop outsourcing of public sector jobs, so that the public sector will employ people in various categories and set the benchmark for salaries for the private sector, so that it becomes at least appropriate salary, appropriate for cost of living. Alright? And then reduce operating costs for business so that 65% don't have to be losing money. This one we have to discuss how this is going to be done. Stop overcrowding, so keep population at 5 to 3. Don't go to 6 to 9. And then reduce full-time national service to 1 year, shorten reservist training to 5 years after ROD, and stop remedial training. So those are my wishes. And now I ask you, did our finance minister do a good job in the last 5 years? And did he recognize the progress of Singapore and all the progress that are shown here? Thank you.
about 10 minutes for any immediate questions to Mr. Tan.
Is it because reducing to 1 year is more acceptable to Singaporeans and that's more complete?
I think national defense is important for Singapore, and I think 1 year is the appropriate length. Switzerland do it for 8 months, and I think NS 1 year is good for our young people to have that discipline, to have that training. So I wouldn't go for scrapping NS. I think on balance it is better. Now, if I were to ask to scrap NS, you can be sure I will be labeled as a traitor of Singapore. Not only by the PAP, but by other Singaporeans. We don't have to go too far. We just go and go big step. So I think 1 year will be. I think most Singaporeans do know we have to do something to defend the country. My complaint is 2 years is wasting too much time. 1 year is just enough, and I think that's my view.
Okay, I agree with you, but I have one question. I'm actually trying to anticipate what other would have asked you. You were saying that 5 years, after the 5 years, they will not go for any reservice and things like that. And then when war comes, this group of people, participate with that, they actually, because I actually joined uniform group last time, and I forgot everything already.
You see, when war comes, it's not sudden. There's always a period of time. There's tension and so on. That's when you realize and give them truth. It's not sudden. Suddenly you got 70,000, plus your active reservists, another 400,000. So you still got 470,000 who are active and who can be operationally ready. Then you got another 500,000 you can call and give them some intensive training. Then can you all help me to get a petition? I need 10,000. Please, all the people you know to sign the petition. Also tell parents, your children, some are going to be boys. Your grandchildren are going to be boys. You better sign now to support. The petition, you just go to Google, search for Tan Kim Lian National Service. Google will tell you where.
Just one question. With regards to the first thing, what do you think will be the appropriate amount to be cut? And where would you cut? Because when I ask you where would you cut, because looking at the context, the modern day context, I have a looking at the modern day context, I feel we have infantry, we have navy, we have air force. There are parts which are actually obsolete. In nowadays war, we don't send soldiers on foot anymore. It's all airstrike, infantry, collect the ammunitions. That's all we do. So why are we spending so much money, land training, blah 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 blah? So I think, what would be your comment? Where did we cut the budget and how much?
You see, I do 2 things. Anytime there is a problem, I say I must understand the question. Okay? And then the next thing I do is I say, what is too much, what is too little, what is appropriate, what is not. Now I can explain 12 million is too much. You take a look at other countries. So 12 billion is too much. And then 950,000 in reservists is too much. Now all these things we all can agree. This is what people with common sense and understanding know. But I'm not a military. I don't have the data of the military. That once, if I were the Prime Minister, I would going to hit me, and they are going to hit me, and I will not accept the polish. Like Singaporeans, we are too used to accepting polish. Okay, so when they come and say, I will say this is too much. Look, the military people have got vested interest. If I got a big budget, the chief of the army is more important. Who wants to be different? But the political leaders have to provide the leadership. Come and say, look, the whole country is not just military. We got other needs. We got other needs, so we need to. So with that, I will say, I will cut the defense budget half. But the military people will come and say, not so possible, can we do a little bit?
There are 4 hands earlier, 1, 2, and 3 around the corner. With that, we will close. There will be again a full panel. You can come back, and I'm also going to encourage Mr. Tan to keep the answers a little bit short. I also have questions, especially his comment that NS guys struggle, but they come back with 2 increments. But never mind, we can talk about it later. Yes, please.
Okay, Mr. Tan, I believe you're an authority on insurance. I would like to hear your comments about the premiums that we're paying for MediShield Medifund. You know, is it appropriate?
I will take all the questions together. Can remember.
Yeah.
And then we have one more. The hand went up here earlier. Somewhere here. Who was the first one? It's okay. Okay.
Okay, there are 2 questions which I want to
One question only.
okay, there are two items. The first item is what you call reservist. As it is, the government cannot handle it. It's like they got too much to handle. They screw up everything. Now they got a problem because there are too many people in Singaporeans looking for jobs and more jobs. When you suggest that what they're doing is they are adding more into the market, and they're not going to agree to it, right? That's for sure. So let's not ask for something that is not going to happen. But what can possibly happen is a change of the M1 policies and send the first employer to jail. Right? I put it in the net that the first time an employer goes to jail, that's when everything is going to fall in place. Now, the second point which I want to say is, you're suggesting that the government comes up with 50 million, 100 million. No, the idea is no, is because we are not paying, you cannot use taxpayers' money to subsidize listed companies owned by Plaza anyway, right? The second thing is, my suggestion to the problem is no increase for citizens. Increase for all others. In other words, now the increase, instead of saying, oh, increase across the board, no increase for citizens. In fact, decrease, maybe 5-10%. And you can increase to 20-30% for foreigners, PRs, and the net effect is this, that when they feel the pinch, then they know how to wake up and change the policy. Because the foreigners now say, oh, I cannot handle it anymore, right? So now, you know how to act, right? That's the way to hit them at the back, right?
Last question from here. Sorry.
Mr. Tan, from your estimate, if you reduce the NS to 1 year, how much will be the savings? Like how much can you deduct from the 12 over B? And then if these people are serving their reservists for only 5 years, how much you think when they go into the job market, how much can they contribute to the economy? And whether we can use that to reduce our dependence on foreigners. Thank you.
The second speaker's suggestions, I totally disagree. I don't like your suggestions, so we can debate outside. And on the question about MediShield, is the premium correct? I spoke to the chairman of MediShield. The approach is quite right. Our government, the biggest insurance expert in Singapore is the health minister. That's rubbish. He doesn't know what the issues are, what so therefore our MediShield premiums are all quite wrong. So I think lunch meeting with the chairman of PG Hui Hui. Next one about what to do when we cut down reservists and free time. There will be, when we cut down the full-time NS, we do need to increase our regular force. When we reduce the reservists, we will save quite a bit of money because a lot of the training that we spend are being wasted. I believe our defense budget can come down to 25 to 50% with the same level of procurement. I also believe that when we use our manpower properly, we don't need to depend so much on foreigners. So to a large extent, Singapore is a very wasteful country and very inefficient. I expressed that view in my blog many times. I also wrote in the newspaper, quite often in the newspaper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tan. I think he has tried to answer those who are burning with questions later when the full panel comes. I just realized there are some housekeeping that I forgot. Your handphones, silent mode. Are there any reporters in the room? From which paper, please? Okay, so we have, thank you, Lian He Chao Pao, and we also have TOC, right? And who's the other reporter, please?
SD.
SD, thank you. Yeah, so I forgot to just let you all know that there are reporters that you didn't know. And then we have Hui Hui for taking home recording, am I right? Yeah. We usually need to know who are the folks with the camera and everything. Huh? Okay, so and this is public, so it's open for all reporters to pick up whatever they wish. Okay?
Anyway, so Mr. Tan Kim Lian has given you a broad overview of the tax structure in Singapore, and he has also asked the question whether the system is fair. So I think we will touch a bit more about this in this presentation. So Mr. Leong Tze Hian and I have written a pamphlet on how much tax Singaporeans are paying. So I'm going to give you an overview of that, and then I will go into a bit of the budgetary issues in Singapore. Okay? So for the start, I'm going to look at a comparative perspective with Sweden and Finland. We look at Sweden and Finland because they are the countries which pays the highest tax, and Singapore is known as the country which pays the lowest tax among the high-income countries. So we'll look at that, and also because the Sweden and Finland, the Nordic countries, they are also the happiest countries, most innovative, most productive. So let's compare Singapore with them. Okay. If you look at personal income tax, it has always been known that Singaporeans pay a low personal income tax, right? We pay 10% of the total proportion of GDP, total amount of government revenue. Okay, so and then if you look at Finland and Sweden, they pay 34% and 40% respectively. So in comparison, it looks quite low, right? But the thing is, when you compare with indirect tax, Singaporeans actually pay 3.5 times more into indirect tax. Whereas for Finland and Sweden, they only pay 1 time more into indirect tax. So we're paying a lot more tax in a sense. Okay, and then if you look at Social Security or CPF, we actually pay 3 times more into CPF. Whereas in Finland and Sweden, they only pay 1 time more and 0.5 times more in Finland and Sweden respectively. So again, we are paying a lot more into CPF. There might be a question about whether CPF is our money, so I'll touch a bit on it later, okay? Because it's not our money. So I guess I don't have to touch on that. Anyway, okay. So if you add it all up, if you look at how much Singaporeans are paying into tax, personal income tax, indirect tax, and Social Security, CPF, we're actually paying 86% into tax and CPF out of government revenue. Whereas if you compare with Finland and Sweden, they pay 94% and 97% respectively. So actually when you look at it, it's not very different. Singaporeans don't pay low taxes at all. Okay. Okay. Why is the issue of low tax important? The issue of low tax is important because we then need to put social protection into perspective. The government is spending money back to us for transport, healthcare, etc. But are they spending enough? So this is the background for that. Okay. For personal, the other thing I want to touch on is on personal income. So we pay tax and social CPF, but the other thing that we also need to pay is out-of-pocket expenditure. The out-of-pocket expenditure that we've calculated is about 1 time more than what we pay into personal income tax and CPF. Okay, but when you look at Finland and Sweden, they don't actually have to pay anything else. They pay next to nothing for healthcare, for education, etc. Okay, so that means that if you add up, Singaporeans actually pay another time more on top of CPF and personal income tax if you include out-of-pocket expenditure. Okay, maybe I'll give you the per capita figures, it will be a bit clearer. Okay, we've calculated that this is out of the resident population of each country. So if you look at personal income tax, Singaporeans pay per capita 2,000 into personal income tax, whereas in Finland and Sweden, they pay about 10,000 and 15,000 per capita into personal income tax. Then if you look at CPF, Singaporeans pay 3 times more, so that's 6,000. And in Finland and Sweden, they pay 7,000 and 6,000 per capita. So actually, when you look at it, it's not very different when you look at CPF, okay? We'll add up more. So when you add up personal income tax and CPF, we actually pay 8,000 in total. And then in Finland and Sweden, this is 17,000 and 21,000. Okay, and when you add in out-of-pocket expenditure, which I say is about 1 time more than what we pay to personal income tax and CPF, right? So that's 8,000 again. So if you add up how much we actually have to pay out of pocket, okay, so Finland and Sweden, they don't have to pay anything else more. So if you add up how much we pay out of pocket into, and then with personal income tax and CPF, we actually pay 16,000. And if you compare with Finland and Sweden, they pay 17,000 and 21,000 per capita, which means that we are not paying that much different from them. I think the question that we have to ask too is, because right now Singaporeans have to pay out of pocket for healthcare, for education, but for the Nordic countries, they pay everything into tax and CPF, social security, but they get back in return free healthcare, free education, etc. Now in Singapore, it's estimated that perhaps 40% of Singaporeans are not able to buy private healthcare insurance, which means they fall out of the system. The thing in Singapore is that it's very unequal because there's very low taxes. The rest of the money comes out from our own pocket. But because a lot of the poor and the low income and the lower middle income, they cannot afford, so they fall out of the system. So the question we have to ask is, do we want a system where the government consolidates the money? A responsible government consolidates the money and redistributes it so that even the low income, middle income and high income can also benefit. In these Nordic countries, how they work is, regardless of your income level, you do get a subsidy that is fair and that is affordable for you in a sense. So the question now is, should we want a system that's more equal, or a system that's so unequal that the low income and the lower middle income fall out? Okay. Can I? Okay. Okay. The next thing I'm going to look at is how much the government pays back to us in social protection. In Singapore, the government gives back in social protection $10,000 per capita. Okay. In Finland and Sweden, the government gives back $24,000 and $28,000 per capita. Okay. And if we add in indirect tax into what we pay, so personal income tax, CPF, out of pocket plus indirect tax, we pay about $22,000. And in Finland and Sweden, they pay $27,000 and $36,000 per capita. So if you look at how much the government gives back in social protection as a proportion of that, the government only gives back 43% in Singapore. But in Finland and Sweden, the government gives back 89% and 79% respectively, which is a lot higher. Okay. So if the government is spending as much as what the Nordic countries is spending, they should be giving back about $18,000. So that's about twice as much, which what this means is that there's actually a loss expenditure of about $8,000, which the government is not giving back. Okay, if you compare with the Nordic countries. Okay, so I want to move into talking about wages. We need to look at how much we pay in taxes in perspective. So we pay almost as much as the Nordic countries into tax and CPF and social security, right? But if you look at wages, in Singapore, Singaporeans, out of the total GDP, Singaporeans only get 42% of that back into wages. Okay, but in the Nordic countries, the people would get like 60% wage. Okay, which means that Singaporeans get about 20 percentage points lower in terms of what we should get back in wages. For the other high-income countries, they pay 55 to 60% into wages, while in Singapore it's only 42%. Okay, so when you look at that in perspective, that means that Singaporeans, the median wage is about 3,000. So in a year, it's 36,000. Okay, so in Finland, they earn almost 160% more. They earn 56,000 per year. And in Sweden, they earn almost 170% more. They earn 60,000 per year. So now we pay almost the same as what they do into personal income tax, CPF, out-of-pocket expenditure, but we get a much lower wage. So what that means is that we spend 65% of our wage paying for all these things. Whereas in Finland, they only need to pay 47%, and in Sweden, they only need to pay 59%. And so we pay the highest proportion, and we have the lowest. The purple bar is how much we have left. Even if you just look at the purple bar as compared to this proportion, you can see that our purchasing power is very, very low. Because we are paying almost the same, but because our wages are so low, our purchasing power is also very low. A study done by UBS in 2011 ranked Singapore as having the lowest purchasing power, which is almost the same as Kuala Lumpur, which is actually, but we are 4 times more richer than them by GDP per capita, yet we have the same purchasing power. So that's very bad. Okay. So the next question we have to ask is, are Singaporeans being treated fairly? Okay, in terms of wages, let's look at it. So if you look at, this is a yellow box, you can't see, but it's the whole of the total income in Singapore. So if you look at how much the richest 1% earns, the richest 1% actually earns as much as the poorest 40% in Singapore. Okay. This is a bit also, actually the divide is even further now. Okay. And then if you look at how much the richest 5% earn, oh by the way, for the richest 1%, the real median income is $2.1 million. So you can kind of guess who's in the top 0.1% in Singapore. Okay. Then for the richest 5%, they earn as much as the poorest 60% in Singapore. And for the richest 5%, they earn about $15,000 and above. Okay, so you can also kind of guess who's in the richest 5%. Okay, and then for the richest 20%, they earn as much as the poorest 80% in Singapore. So that means the divide is quite big. The poorest 80% actually takes about 50% of the income, whereas the richest 20% takes the other 50%. The divide is, what the problem is in Singapore is, even though our median wage is the lowest, for the high income earners, they actually earn the highest wages in Singapore, and the low income earners earn the lowest wages in Singapore. The divide, the disparity is the widest in Singapore as compared to all the other high income countries. Okay. So that is why income inequality, like Mr. Takele has said, is highest in Singapore as compared to all the high income countries. And also poverty rate, as we've calculated at 26%, is also much higher than all the other countries. Poverty rate in this instance is half of the median wage. Median wage is about 3,000 now, so half of it is anyone who earns below 1,500 is living in poverty. Okay, so that's 26%. We'll take a look at the specific wage that each people are earning. So these are 3 Singaporeans. The low income earner earns about $800 per month. The medium income earner earns 3,000, and the high income earner earns about 15,000. Okay, and then in a year, the low income earner would earn 9,600, the middle income 36,000, and the high income earner $180,000. Okay, so we calculated how much they need to spend for the basic necessities. So for tax, Singaporeans, the highest income earner pays about 20%. Singaporeans pay about 36% into CPF. Employer 16%, and employee 20%. Okay. For food, we estimate that a person spends $15 per day, transport about $100 per month, housing about $600 per month for a 4-room flat. Healthcare, we estimate about $1,000, and education $2,000 for 2 school-going children in university and polytechnic. It's actually a lot higher, but we put in a low estimate. Okay. This is how much they pay in a year, 20% to tax for the highest income earner. By the way, there's no discrimination for high income earners and low income earners, etc. I'm pointing out the specific scenario in Singapore, so there's no, there shouldn't be a distinction, because the system is fair, regardless of whether you're low income or high income earner. It's a fair system for all. Do I make sense? Okay, anyway, we'll go on. So for CPF, oh, sorry. Okay, so for CPF, the employee CPF is 20%. So out of their wage, we just look at it as 20%. Okay, how much they get in wages and how much they pay to CPF. Okay, and then for food, they will pay about 5,400 a year, 1,200 a year for transport, 7,200 a year for housing, and for healthcare and education is 1,000 and 2,000. So if you look at how much a low income earner spends, just to put it into perspective, tax is $0, CPF is about $1,920, but for food we put in a lower estimate because they are poor, so we put it as $3,600. Okay, and then for housing we put it as $1,200 because they are renting HDB flats, so that's about $100 per month on average. Okay, yeah. Okay, so for the low-income earner, they would pay about 20% into tax and CPF. For the middle-income earner, they would pay about 21% into tax and CPF. And for the high-income earner, they would pay about 15% into tax and CPF. So that means that for the low-income and the middle-income earners, they actually have a much lower purchasing power because they pay out a higher proportion of their wages into tax and CPF. Okay, so how much would they have left? For the low-income earner, after accounting for all this, they actually go into a debt of more than $1,000. But for the middle income earner, they earn about $12,000 a year. They save about $12,000 a year. And for the high income earner, they save about $135,000 a year. Okay, and if you look at, say, that means that for the low income earner, they have to forego some form of expenditure. So for them, they might have to forego education, for example. Okay. Now, if you added the other, say if the couple has 2 children, so they have to spend more for another children, they have additional expenses of food and transport, and they might have to buy insurance because the current Medisave and Medishield does not provide 100% expenditure coverage for Singaporeans. You do have to buy private insurance. So we estimate about $2,400 for the middle income and high income earner. Okay. So how much would they have to spend? It's about $4,800 for the low income and $9,000 for the high income and middle income earner. And again, when you look at how much they have to save in total, the low-income person actually goes to a debt of more than $6,000, whereas the middle-income earner will only be able to save $2,000 or $3,000 in a year. Okay, that means that for the low-income earner, they have to forgo education, they have to forgo healthcare. So what this means is that possibly about 50% or more Singaporeans would never be able to save and retire. Okay. Okay. Let me think. I think I'll just quickly go through this. So for the middle-income earner, I've talked about how the disparity is the widest. In the other countries, the disparity is a lot smaller between the income levels. Okay, for the middle income compared to the low income, they earn about 4 times more. For the high income earners, they earn about 19 times more than the low income. Okay, and if you look at how much they have left in a year, this is how much they have left, and how much they have left in a month. For the high income earner, for the low income earner, they won't be able to save at all, but for the high income earner, they actually save more than what a low income earner earns in a year. Okay, and then if you look at additional luxury items, the only middle income and low income earner would not be able to purchase them, but for the high income earner, they will still be able to purchase and have a huge savings left over. I think the point here to make is that the income disparity is wide in Singapore. Should we narrow it so that the low income earners can get higher wages, so that the purchasing power across the board is also rises? Okay. I think so. The next question is, what if Singaporeans are paid fairly? If Singaporeans are paid fairly, for the low income earner, instead of earning $800 a year, I estimate that they will earn about $2,800 a year, and for the middle income, they might earn about $6,000. Because for the prices and the cost of living that we have in Singapore, if you look at the comparative, a country which has a similar price level, they earn about twice the median wage that we do, $6,000. So after you deduct so that's the annual expenditure, and after you deduct for the expenditure, this is the savings that you get. So at least for the low-income earner, they would now be able to save instead of going to a debt. Okay, and the middle-income earner would also be able to save a lot more. And this is compared to how much they are actually saving at this point. Instead of going into debt, a low-income earner will be able to save more. Okay. And then if they want to buy a luxury item, say a car, even a middle income would be able to purchase a car at this point. And the car might not be a luxury item because for families, it is a real need. Okay, so even after you look at the savings that they have, everyone in Singapore will be able to save if we are able to ensure that everyone has fair wages, are paid fairly. Okay. Yeah. So the next question you might ask is, some people have asked, so do we have enough money in Singapore? We want to talk about increasing wages, we want to talk about having better social benefits for Singaporeans, but do we have the wages? And do we have the money to do so? And we do. Let's look at healthcare. For Medisave, there is 60 billion currently inside the Medisave amounts, of which only 768 million is spent in a year, which is only 1.3%. And if you look at the Medishield surplus, from 2000 to 2010, there's 850 million in the surplus, but only 282 million is spent, or 33%. Okay? And for Medifund, there's 3 billion capital, but only 100 million is spent. So this is only 3.2%. And if you add it all up, the total 3M amount that we have is nearly 64 billion, but we are only using 1.2 billion, which is about 1.8%. Okay, so that means that because we're only spending this 1.8% is only 8 point. So out of total health expenditure, Medisave, Medishield, Medifund only accounts for 8.8%. Okay, which means that because we have such low expenditure, out of the total government expenditure, the government only spends 30%. Makes sense? In other high-income countries, the governments will spend 70%. But in Singapore, our government only spends 30%. So if we were to spend as much as what the other high-income countries are spending, we should if we spend up to 10% of the whole total 3M amount, we would actually be able to meet that 70% target. And there will still be 90% left in that amount for investments or whatever uses. So there is still quite a significant number of money left in the 3M amount. Okay? And then if you look at the total health expenditure, like I say, the total health expenditure is 13.1 billion, out of which only 5.5% is through Medisave, 2.1% from Medishield, 0.7% from Medifund, and Singaporeans have to spend out of pocket 61.3%, more than 60%, and the government only spends 30%. So as I said, in other countries, the government would spend up to 70 or more percent. Okay, on average it's 70%, but in other countries it's about 80%. So if you look at how much the government subsidies are, the 4 billion is actually only 6% of the whole 3M amount that we have. Okay. Next, we look at CPF. CPF, Singaporeans are only earning 2.5 to 4% of our CPF. But it's known that the CPF is invested in the reserves. The reserves are invested by Temasek Holdings and GIC. So GIC earns 6.5 interest per annum since inception, and Temasek earns 16% since inception. So now, if you look at how much we save for a person who retires at 65, based on for a medium income earner, so someone who earns about 3,000, when he retires with a 2.5 to 4% interest, they might retire with only 700,000 when they retire. But if they are able to get back the interest rates that the GIC and Temasek are earning, they might get back about 7.5%, which would be about 2.8 million. So this tax that we are not getting back, which is between 3.5% to 5%, is known as the implicit tax, which is not being returned to Singaporeans. So if I think the next chart you can see is, in the total CPF balance, there is currently 248 billion in our CPF. So this is how much Singaporeans have contributed, nearly 250 billion. And of which only 11 billion was withdrawn last year. So, I mean, if CPF is really our money, why is there such a huge balance inside the CPF? Okay, and if you look at how much our CPF is invested in the reserves, and you look at who is managing the reserves and how much they have, the Monetary Authority of Singapore manages 320 billion, Temasek Holdings manages 215 billion, and GIC manages 360 billion. So in total, they manage about $1 trillion, of which the CPF that we are putting in is helping to earn. So the reserves have a lot of money, but what about Singaporeans and our retirement funds? Where is it going? Okay. Then next, if you look at housing, a very quick example, say a 4-room flat is $250,000. Mr. Leong Soo Hian estimate that the construction cost is up 40%, which is 100,000. So even with that, the 165,000 that we're paying is actually money that's being made. Because it's known that the land cost costs next to nothing for the Singapore government. Okay? Yeah. I think Mr. Leong will further elaborate on that. Yeah. And then I'll go to education. Education is, it was recently reviewed a few weeks ago that tuition grants, the government gives 210 million in tuition grants for international students. Okay? And for scholarships, 36 million is given per cohort per year. Okay? So that's for per cohort. If you look at all cohorts, it will be about 144 million in a year. In total, if you add it all up, whatever the government is paying for international students for tuition grants and scholarships would be $400 million. If you look at the $400 million that's given back to Singaporeans, we would all be able to get, all the undergraduate Singaporean students will be able to get free education. All pre-university students before preschool will be able to get free education. And all preschool children will be able to get free education if you just look at the $400 million amount. So the question is, if the government is willing to spend that much money for international students, should they first consider spending that money on Singaporeans first, and then spend it on international students? Okay. Yeah. Now let's look at transport. This is the fare revenue, fair and non-fare revenue that's being collected in Singapore. this is the operating expenses. Also, this is the fare. The light purple bar is the fare and non-fare revenue for SMRT and SDS Transit. The dark purple bar are the operating expenses for these two transport companies. You can see that whatever they collect in revenue from us is actually higher than the operating expenses, which means that Singaporeans fully subsidize for their transport operating costs. But if you look at the other high-income countries, the government would actually step in to subsidize perhaps about 50% of that cost. So again, where is the government's subsidy here? If you look at how much, how much Singaporeans are paying for fare revenue is about 113% more than operating expenses. This is known as the fare box recovery ratio. Only Singapore and Hong Kong has such a high ratio. For the other high-income countries, it's about 50%, which means that the government will step in to foot the other 50% of the bill. Okay. And then if you look at how much profits SMRT and SDS has earned from 2000 to 2013, they've earned more than $2.6 billion. So recently, the government announced, a few years ago, they announced that they will give the transport operators $1.1 billion for the buses. But if they have $2.6 billion, why are Singaporeans spending $1.1 billion in addition for that? And even if you see how much the transport operators will spend, if they purchase the buses by themselves, they will still have $1.5 billion left in profits. So that's still a lot of money. And if they are public transport operators, should they be earning such high profits? Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. What I want to say is that, do we have that money? If you look at how much we have in healthcare, transport, how much we are paying for transport, education, we do have that kind of money. It's just a matter of prioritization, whether the government is willing to prioritize the amount of government subsidies that they should be giving back. And we do have that kind of money, so it's about making sure that it's more equitably distributed. Okay? Makes sense? Yeah. So the question is, are Singaporeans being treated fairly? And then are Singaporeans being taken advantage of? Are we being taken for granted? We are paying all that tax, but first we're not seeing it come back in terms of social protection, and next, we're not seeing it being distributed evenly, and we're also not seeing it distributed as much as the government's responsibility should be. So I guess moving on, we will talk about I think Mr. Leung will share further about the stats, and then we'll talk more about the proposals and the submissions that the other agencies have.
In the interest of transparency, you want to know who paid for the rental today? Paid that. So I paid the $1,650. And I'm getting some echo here, so maybe I should try this out. And maybe that's why he's not very happy today. And I think there's been some echo somewhere. Can you turn off all the mics? Can everybody turn off? But anybody who has a mic, can you please turn it off? All the mics are off. This mic also died already. Okay? I think the stand in the middle is carry to the rescue. Thank you. Hey, as I was saying, maybe that's why Roy is not so happy today. Because he paid the $1,650 first. So, trouble now. Never ask me to read bio, cut and paste from internet, such a long one. If you go to my website, my bio is like 1/3 of the one that Brenda read out. Normally when I speak, I don't have slides, right? But today I have that. Why? Because today I'm starting off with Marua's budget submission. If I don't have slides, my president will call and talk to me for at least 1 hour. Because I think it's shorter to ask Phoebe to help me to do up the slides than to talk to my president for more than 1 hour. So that's why we have slides.
Cannot hear you, is it?
Tony Tan, my classmate from Raffles. You cannot hear, never mind. The last row can hear me? I think Tony, you have a problem with your ears. Brenda, when she started with extremely long introduction, focus quite a lot on education. Mr. Tan Kim Lian also focused quite a lot on education. Ryan, really, I think you really rub it in the end, right? If we don't spend the money that we spend on foreign students, correct me if I'm wrong, Roy, everybody free, right? So the problem is, when you listen to the Roy or you listen to Kim Lian, you listen to Brema, it's all statistics, you know. But let me try and give you the, shall I say, the human side of the statistics. We spend on education as the second largest item in the budget. Defense is the most one. Do you know that when the news came out, I think about a week ago, that they want to cut the funding for independent schools? Why? Because all of a sudden, now you are being told all schools are supposed to be the same, you know. So the supposed elite schools have to cut. So when I read this, I said, something strange must be going on, right? Now we always say, when in doubt, what do? Go check out the statistics. So I looked up the Ministry of Education, MOE, Education Digest for 2013. Oh, lo and behold, you know, secondary school developmental expenditure in the last 14 years, in real terms, decreased by 82%. In practically every country's history, education is so important that most countries' education expenditure, and here I'm talking about operating expenditure for university students, most countries, that figure will increase every year at a percentage that is even higher than GDP growth. You know, in the last 27 years, relative to GDP growth, our per capita spending on university education declined by, listen to this, 464%. I say that again, just in case you missed it. In the last 27 years, university spending per university student relative to GDP growth decreased by 464%. Was it Kim Lian who said, want to search for your petition, just Google Tan Kim Lian National Service, right? So for me, this one very easy. Just Google Leong Sian, 464%. The article will come out. I think better use the slides now. I'm not using the This is Marua's submission for budget 2014. Oh, by the way, you know Roy did practically everything. The 10-part article, the 10-part infographics, the videos, the charts. He's the coordinator for today's forum. He pays the money for the rental. This guy is phenomenal. How a round of applause for Roy. I did about 10% of the work. Dia tak sambil makan discussion. Okay. Marua's submission for this year's budget focuses on 3 areas, mainly education, healthcare, and retirement. What are you laughing for? For budget 2013, right? Like everybody else, aware, Marua, everybody was thinking about, oh, we need to improve social mobility, we need to increase social safety nets, right? You hear this so often nowadays now. Every week you open the newspaper, you see the same thing. So let's look at the numbers and see how the rhetoric is being translated into the statistics. So this is the never-ending call, expanding further social protection. But look at what Roy showed you. We spent the least. So we have a lot to expand. And I'm wondering what the next part is all about. For education, total subsidies in the last financial year. Now just again you see, how come Mr. Tan Kim Yen one is 11 point something and this one is 10 point something. Kim Yen is the budget for the current financial year. What I'm showing you is the actual finalized figure for the last reported financial year. 10.7 billion. How much fees do we collect from all the students? University fees, secondary school fees, 1.2 billion. But it's estimated that the poor parents amongst us, we pay out-of-pocket expenses about 1.6 billion. Like I said, if you are in like the Nordic countries, you hardly have to pay any out-of-pocket expenses for education. Of course, you pay more taxes, but more or less compared to Singapore, we shall talk a bit more about that later. So, government should increase expenditure by 2 billion. 2 billion is peanuts, you know why? Last year, the reported budget surplus was 3.9 billion. So we say, okay lah, 3.9 billion, I spend another 2 billion in education, I still have a 1.9 billion budget surplus. But that's not all. According to the Department of Statistics, using IMF fiscal reporting standards, our surplus for the last financial year was a whopping $36.1 million. IMF fiscal reporting standards means there are some things that you cannot report as expenditure, such as when you transfer to endowment funds, no country reports it as an expenditure. Only our unique Singapore fiscal reporting standards will report the transfer to endowment funds as an expenditure. So what this does, it gives you the impression that we have a lower surplus every year. Because this one actually cannot minus one. Then you have things like land sales. There are a lot of revenue that we do not count in our budget reporting. But use IMF standards, you never count them. And of course, we're also asking for full subsidies for childcare. So, bottom line, increase government expenditure on education, move the public expenditure as a percentage of GDP. Oh, I want to acknowledge my idol has arrived. It's the wrestling too. You know that the cartoonist, the only Singaporean who has ever been arrested. What never mind. I mean, the police report arrested for something that nobody has been arrested for. Anyway, they let you out already. Look at how much money we are spending, look at billions, all these are what we call picking at the pieces. Just look at in total, how much money the government spends and how much we spend. 31.7% government subsidies. Out of pocket, 61.3%. The bottom line, roughly, every dollar of healthcare spending in Singapore, government spends 1/3 and you spend 2/3. Like I said, in the Nordic countries, there will hardly be any out-of-pocket expenditure for that. You know, when we look at percentages, statistics, they're quite meaningless. But if you do financial counseling, like many of my volunteers have done for the last 10 years or so, practically every day you need people who come and say, oh, you know, Mr. Leong, I'm homeless because I have to sell my house to pay for healthcare. Every day, you get stories of people come, Mr. Leong, my son doesn't go for treatment anymore because they're afraid if you don't pay how. So let's look at what all this means for lower income people. You know, Medishield cover is the lowest medical cover in Singapore. It's not even private integrated shield. We have about 92.7% of the population of the residents who are insured under Medishield. This statistic was disclosed in Parliament. 2,400 Medishield claims in 1 year. The co-payment was more than $10,000. You know, Medishield is class C and B2. It's supposed to be the most subsidized, the cheapest ward that Medishield is supposed to cover. It's supposed to be poor, and that's why you only buy the cheapest plan Medishield. And yet, in 1 year, 2,400 lower income Singaporeans had to cough up more than $10,000 in co-payment. Co-payment is the deductible in the co-insurance. And that is the problem with our healthcare system, right? That the poor get hit worse. Hey Roy, how did you mention this one? Roy is this. Every time he says he the staff, he write, and then they split the whole night. Very long, a lot of charts. But let me make a confession. Of all the research Roy has done, the best one is this one. So that is, if you take the simple benchmark measure that is used in the world today, okay, how to measure poverty? What is poverty like? There's one very simple measure. You just take the median income and you count how many workers earn less than the median income. Wow, Singapore is the highest of the high income countries. It's 26%. That means about a quarter of the people who workers actually earn less than half the median income. Scary, right? I estimate if you include the self-employed, the part-time workers, we are looking at about 600,000 people who earn less than 1,500, 400,000 people who earn less than 1,200, and more than 200,000 people who earn less than $1,000. We are truly a first world country. Look at the numbers. How much is our medicine expenditure? You know, in 1 year, how much we contribute to medicine? Actually, nobody knows. But never mind. I took this one to the end because this one is a bit cheap, complicated. So we to the end. But the bottom line is this, you know. The 3 M's actually is quite useless. And of course, Professor Paul Comparative is here. So during the break, let's ask him how useless the 3 M's is. But let me just give you one startling aspect of the 3 M's that shows you how useless it is. Like, this is this one. Look at this. Medishield is only paying 2.1% of Singapore's total healthcare expenditure. Find me another national health insurance scheme in the world that pays only 2.1% of total expenditure. We are not even. Somebody asked in Parliament, how much is the Medishield claims to premium ratio? The answer came in the 10 years or so, 2001 to 2010, there was a surplus of 850 million. You know, most countries' national healthcare budgets and national health schemes are operating in deficit. You know? You can read about it every day in the newspapers. We are probably the only country in the world where national health just couldn't make money on it. And haven't even count the interest on this 850 million. This is just the pure claims to expense, what you call premiums ratio. We have 60 billion in the Medisave accounts. And how much is withdrawn a year to pay for direct medical expenses? 700 over. So all this money, very little is being used. Now, when very little is being used from the government, from Medisave, from Medishield, what is the bottom line? It comes up from your pocket in cold, hard cash. What is not 3M, it's cash. You add up everything. It's only 1.3% of your total Medisave balance is being used every year. We have 3 billion in the Medifund, and yet only about 100 million is being used a year. Why are we keeping all this money in endowment funds and using, if I may call, peanuts every year, and then you end up paying a lot of nuts? That essentially is the problem of our healthcare system. You need to increase nurses' wages, you must have more wages, you must have more nursing homes, this is given. We already talked about this, but since it's in the Marua budget section, we get a miserable 2.5% on the bulk of our CPF. Temasek gets 16% from this section. GIC, excuse me, if you're very angry, you can throw your anger at somebody else. Okay? Look at the numbers. As Roy said, all these are implicit tax on Singaporeans. The problem is not just we are not getting a lot of benefits back. The problem is we contribute about the same in terms of, say, social security compared to the Nordic countries. But you fast forward to when we retire, we get so little back. And the reason is very simple. They are growing theirs at whatever rate of return they are getting on their pension funds, let's say 6%. We are getting as low as the miserable 2.5%. And that's why we find that at the end of the day, only an estimated 1 in 8 Singaporeans when they reach 55 can meet the minimum sum, which is currently 148,000, and highly retrenched from the CPF. In any country in the world, if you have a national pension scheme where only 1 out of 8 can meet so-called the minimum, you have a big problem. Oh, I'm so happy the slides are over. So now I can be my normal self. I analyzed the wages statistics yesterday because I know I'm speaking today. So I then must pretend to do some research and not Roy take all the glory, right? In the last 13 years or so, the real median wage growth in Singapore for the 8 basic categories of workers. You know, Singapore has 8 categories of workers. Cleaners, sales and service workers, managers, professionals, and so on. 8 categories. In the last 13 years or so, the real median wage growth for 5 out of the 8 categories was negative. And that's for 13 years after a just for inflation, no pay increase. Cannot find any country in the world, in the history of the world, that has such a dismal statistic that we are truly number 1. I say 5 out of 8. Also not so bad, right? 3 out of 8 have a positive real increase in wages per annum. Of the 3, 2 of them was less than 0.5% per annum. The highest one, only 0.78% per annum. Let me give you some examples. If you are earning $1,000 13 years ago, if your real wage growth, the highest one was 0.78, that means after 13 years, your real pay has only increased by $100. $10 a year. It is not just the wages that is an issue. The problem is jobs. in 2000, if you look at the employment change numbers, employment change is like jobs created lah, no? Every year, how many more jobs are added to total employment? In 2000, the percentage of jobs created that were going to Singaporeans was 45%. Because in 2000, every 100 jobs they create, 45 went to Singaporeans. Then you look at the data from 2000 to 2006, I think, because this is a very old Ministry of Manpower report. Gradually, the jobs that went to Singaporeans start to decline. By my estimate, come to today, which is about 13 years later, if we make an adjustment for the huge influx of new citizens and new permanent residents that we have had in recent years, my estimation, it's just my estimation, why? Because they don't break down the data anymore into PRs and Singaporeans. I have no way of figuring out. I can only estimate. I estimate that now it may be as low as only 10%. Now you know why. There are so many people who say, oh, I get a job. Look, the problem in Singapore is this. Lots of unemployment, lots of underemployment, lots of long-term unemployed. Long-term is give up already, you know. A lot of economically inactive people who are economically inactive not because they want to, because they cannot get a decent paying job. You know, the propaganda today is quite unique. Every week got job fair, you know. Every time you see the same type of jobs, only thing they go around to a different place. But they never tell you what is the pay for the jobs. So the last one, I think a few days ago, there was another job fair. So they quoted 4 types of workers. I think it was sales and service workers, welders, machinists, and retail assistants, and customer service officers. So I used the MOM benchmarking wages tool. Check what is the pay of all these people. Basic pay for retail assistants is, I think, $1,074, about $1,050 now. Right? Then what about customer service officers? Cannot find insufficient data. What about machinists? Cannot find as well. Well, that's quite good. I think about 1,600. So the question got to ask is, the last vacancies report say, hey, so many jobs Singaporeans don't want there. More than 61,000 jobs Singaporeans don't want. Not only that, a lot of jobs more than 6 months still cannot find people to work. All this is pure propaganda. Let me give you a classic example of propaganda. Since you're on the budget, you might notice that the newspaper started a new series called, with a dollar sign, The Budget and Me. Then they show you an example of how lower income Singaporeans have benefit for the budget. So the first one is the classic one. It says that because of workfare, this man was able to buy a $1,600 computer for his son, so he can go to poly, right? So it says there, wow, there are about $200 increase in workfare. So I'd be curious to go check. Hello, it's not $200 a year. It's not $200 a month. It's, to be exact, it's $177 in cash in workfare for this man. So $177 cash help him to buy a $1,600 computer. If this is the best kind of propaganda that we can come up with, okay, we have a problem. You notice every bus stop, everywhere, spending lots of money telling you, we are doing this for you, we are doing that for you. Might just save all this money and just do that. I'm going to end by telling you that not only from a cash flow perspective, and of course on a relative basis, do Singaporeans pay the highest taxes in the world, get the least benefits back, and this is manifested by the fact that if you look at the cash flows the government does not spend a single cent on healthcare, does not spend a single cent on SDB, it does not spend a single cent on CPF. And that is the mother of all our problems. Whether you are fighting for human rights, or women's rights, or gay rights, or labor rights, or civil and political rights, unless this fundamental issue of our fiscal system changes, I think we're going to keep doing this, until God knows when.
To Mr. Tan, thank you. On your speech, you said that 65% of the companies are making profits, and you said that you look towards reducing the operation cost. So, what do you understanding, or what are the operating costs for the companies in Singapore that make up most part of it? The other question is on so-called national service. Since you're saying that there should be others like we look at the national service, do you think that there's like females should be serving NS? So these are my two questions.
Now, our high cost rental and wages and a lot of inefficiency. Somehow our government agencies require businesses to do certain things, very inefficient. I've raised this many times, and nobody bothers to try and understand and solve the problem. Should females also spend 1 year like males? Answer is yes.
I'm sorry, can you give an example of what are the things that are inefficient?
Just to go to the ACRA and then to the Ministry of Manpower, just to terminate a work permit, the process takes a long time, and the way they handle things are idiotic. So these are the things, and then interacting with government departments, they will not send you email because somehow email is not secure, and they will send you ordinary mail. There are plenty of very idiotic things.
But what would that actually contribute to the operation cost?
I employ people, and they are very costly, and they spend a lot of time on all these, and they are very costly. Even making ordinary payments, you have to write checks and mail out and so on. So, and I have raised this many times directly with the ministries. For 2-3 years, nothing happens. Nobody cares.
Okay. Next question, anyone? Yes, Paul?
This question is directed at Vivian and anyone else. It's about the means testing. And I do agree that means testing has created a lot of problems. In fact, I asked the health minister about this 3 years ago, and he made a curious comment. He said that means testing wasn't to deal with existing problems, it was to deal with future problems. And so I'm curious as to whether you think that means testing is going to be part of the Pioneer Generation package. Because there's been some talk about this Pioneer Generation package being targeted at the most needy, and so do you think means testing is going to be part of that? And anyone else who wants to comment on means testing in the budget?
I have no inside information on this Pioneer Generation package, so I don't know what they are going to do. But we have done some calculation and research, and also compilation of cases where family members whose Medisave are being dipped into, up to 3 generations can be impoverished by just having one hospitalization event by one family member. And there is also a kind of in practice, there is also kind of like, if people can pay, make them pay. Regardless of whether they are able, they are eligible because they are disabled, they are elderly, they have no children. All these don't take all these are not taken into consideration. You just kind of cast your net to whoever, nieces, nephews, whoever, cousins, second cousins, third cousins, just find some sucker somewhere who's willing to do it, and then they're in. Then once, and there's no cap, that's another thing. Once people have agreed to, have their Medisave dipped into for a family member, it's not like, there's a cap, you only pay 100 or you pay 200 or whatever. It can go on, and people get impoverished, and this is why, you end up with people who are having to sell their houses to pay for healthcare costs, not just of themselves, but of their family members. So this says a lot about what kind of social mobility is available for families in general. So I can't say too much about the pioneer generation, but I expect all those bad things that are now happening would also happen if that were to be the case.
I just wanted to make two very quick points. The experience in England, which I'm familiar with because I've worked there for a long time, is that means testing is a highly inefficient way of apportioning public services. This is a well-known idea. The amount of money you spend doing the means testing could have been spent to, and actually has a positive impact on the amounts that are spent. For example, our social workers in our public hospitals today spend up to 75% of their time just doing the means testing. Can your grandfather pay? Can your grandmother pay? Can your cousin pay? 75%. So you take two of those workers, you already have 1.5 staff that you could have used elsewhere. This is the first point. The second point is we must wait for the Pioneer package to see what it will entail before putting too much hope in it. This government is very good with the cosmetic packages and less good with the deep-seated endemic kind of reviews. My sense is that if we are going to look at the welfare system as a whole to impact on things like what Vivian just said, we need to approach the underlying assumptions of the CPF system. Don't forget, CPF system provides for healthcare, education, pension, and housing as well. So, if we are going to look at welfare in its totality, it's the CPF system that we start with.
So far, the Pioneer Generation package, what has been announced, is only focused on healthcare. But as expected, a few days after that, then you have all this call to increase CPF contribution rates in order to help you to pay healthcare. So apparently, the system will continue to perpetuate itself, whereby the government will continue not to spend a single cent on healthcare, simply because the increase in CPF that you collect is probably more than whatever that the government is going to spend for the Pioneer Generation. And as it stands today, you look at MediShield Life, the way all the recommendations are coming up in the debate, it looks like everything has to be paid from the premiums of the people, So I think at the end of the day, most likely, all the younger people here will have to pay for all the older people.
I've never liked means testing is very wasteful. I said those who are well off, you tax them on income tax. After that, you give everybody the same. Why do you want to tax them less and then you go and spend a lot of time on means testing? Now, I have always been against GST because it is very inefficient and costly to be collecting little bits from everything. And then because GST affect poorer people, we have this rebate, GST vouchers and so on. And the GST vouchers is then using some sort of means testing where you live, your family income and so on. It's very complicated. And somebody told me there's a person, a lady who married a Malaysian, live in Kuala Lumpur in a bungalow, and because she needs a mailing address, the mother has a 2-room flat in Singapore, that's a mailing address, and she gets full rebates and whatever benefit for 30 years. This is our wonderful calibrated system.
Sorry, I know there are questions, but I also want to talk about means testing from a rights-based perspective. I think it is very problematic, as Vincent has brought out and Dr. Vivian Wee has brought out, if we put in too many indicators when we do not know really what are we mapping. We are ticking the many boxes according to what the indicators are. And I think at the end of the day, we might even sacrifice the person and where the person comes from. That is one part. The second part, like Paul, I have worked in a hospital before, and I was on the Medifund committee. And we sit there and we deliberate and everything else when a few of us there are saying, if the person has already fallen into this discussion, what is there to sit down and deliberate? And the judgments become hugely interesting. Oh, he's an alcoholic. He's addicted to alcohol. He's addicted to this. She is addicted to that. So a lot of judgments are placed when we so decide who deserves. What right have you, I, or anyone to make these kind of judgments when the person is a person in need? So that there's a whole mismatch in this concept when we start focusing on ticking the boxes. The second point I want to talk about is what Vincent raised, that it takes up 1.5 social workers. That is a budget issue. We have to start talking about this from a budget perspective. How much is a social worker, the wages, and if 1.5 social workers' time is being used to do these kind of means testing, vis-a-vis a priority situation in Singapore, where we do not have enough social workers to case manage, then what is the work of a social worker? So these become budget discussions that we can use to argue for better systems. I think we do have a big ideological, philosophical problem with the whole concept of means testing. Okay, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say that. I saw one hand over here, the lady in green was first. If you have anything, a new topic, no more means testing. Yeah, because we got many topics. And then I saw second hand, Jufri, third hand at the back, right at the back, last row. We take these 3 questions first. Huh? He's just went up. Yeah. Sorry, do you have a question, the lady in green, on means testing?
Okay, I do not know, let you have the judgment whether it's means testing.
We are all thinking